I wanted to thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Pastor Doug Dwyer. I'm the lead pastor at Addisville Reformed Church, and we're spending some time with Cynthia Eppley, and we're talking about the impact that this pandemic has had upon our lives. Before I got started, though, I did want to just share a little bit about Cynthia. She is married to Bob. It'll be 46 years this coming May. She has 3 grown children, 2 adorable granddaughters. Bob and Cynthia are members of Orland Evangelical Presbyterian Church. She has served on various boards as well as teaching both adult and children's Christian education. She has a Bachelor in Science and Chemistry, Medical Technology from Elizabethtown College, and a Master of Arts in Counseling from Biblical Theological Seminary in Hatfield, which is now known as Missio. She began medical technology and microbiology work and worked in that field for many years. She went on to seminary to get her master's in biblical counseling. She began working first with Christian Counseling Center of Dublin, and that's actually where I first met Cynthia. And then she went on to establish her own business, Counseling. This is what she has said about this. I consider counseling to be a privilege we all live alongside of people in their journey toward hope and healing is an honor. And from a Christian perspective, that only hope is found in Christ. I have been a teacher, retreat speaker, and consultant. So we're very happy to have Cynthia with us. And probably, Cynthia, just to kind of get it going, probably if you could share a little bit about your own experience, what your experience has been like going through this pandemic.
Yes, thank you. I'm very excited to share some of these ideas with you. It's a wonderful forum, and so thank you. It's a privilege to be able to do that, and especially with you, Pastor Doug, being a long-term friend and colleague.
Yes,
absolutely. Personally, I did begin to sense uneasiness through the pandemic. My husband and I are in that certain demographic that is considered higher risk. And that was a surprise when neighbors would begin to say, if you need anything, I will go to the store for you. And I thought that was so kind. And then I realized, I'm in a demographic that would need help. And so that was, I think, the first realization, with a bit of humor, but also a bit of unease going to the store, wondering what you're touching, what you're breathing. And of course, it's only gotten worse as time has gone on. And most recently, we hit the 30-day mark. And I've noticed a change in people and their reactions to it. It's become much more intense. So I think I've sensed it in other people, but also in myself. One day I wanted to make a certain dinner, and it needed lemons. Before, I would have just run to the store, or Bob would have run to the store to get lemons. Now I have to think through, is it really worth being exposed? What else can I make now? And so a shift in security, a shift in the ease of your life. What you used to do before is no longer quite so easy. So yes, definitely, we have thought through this. We have had a death in our family in Western Pennsylvania. Felt unable to go to drive that far and expose them because we're in Montgomery County. So there's been many levels of restriction, care, being aware of what we need to do, what we can't do, what we should do. So the thought process is very much intense.
Right. Yeah. And I guess that brings me to another question, is anxiety. People have been feeling different levels of anxiety. I keep hearing on TV them saying we're all in this together.
Mhm.
And well, there's some truth in that, but the reality is we experience different degrees of anxiety depending on where we are in life and what we're doing. And if you're a first responder or you're a nurse or a doctor, that's a different level than a person who's able to stay home and not go out. So there's different degrees of anxiety. But I guess that would be, is it wrong for us to feel a level of anxiety in this?
Absolutely not. And I'm glad you brought that up because it's a very common statement right now. We're all in this together. And while we
Yeah.
certainly are,
Yes.
not just nationally, but internationally, we are all in this together, but we are at different degrees of response. And so,
Yes.
as you said, I might be a frontline, first line responder. And because of that, I'm exposed
Yes.
continually as I go to work. When I
Right.
come home, I have the extra burden of being very careful with my family, my children, my husband. I might be at the grocery store stocking shelves now at 2 a.m. because I've taken that job. And so I'm very conscious of having to work a different schedule because I lost my first job. I was furloughed.
Yeah.
I was laid off.
Right.
For parents, suddenly they have been thrust into a role of full-time childcare. They may have been working. Now they're at home with their child, but they're trying to work from home at one level. At a second level, they're trying to homeschool. And so very few of us are really in the same boat. We are all in this
Right.
together, but at different levels.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the
Levels
anxiety
of
that
intensity,
comes,
I guess. Yeah.
yeah, the anxiety that comes from all that is this is a new place that we're all in, and we don't really have an experience to base our reactions.
Yeah.
It's new for all of us.
What are some of the side effects that can cause when you're dealing with anxiety over long term? What are some of the things that we can experience along with the anxiety that really come out of that?
That's a very good question, and I see this in so many people. Probably the first thing I would want to address is that this is very much like a grief cycle. And as people are going through the loss, there are so many losses. There's a loss of fellowship, first and foremost in our faith communities that we have always appreciated, but now it is at a completely different level. We thank God for Zoom, for FaceTime,
Yes.
for
Yeah.
other avenues that we can touch base, but we long for that community that we have had and now is 6 feet away from us at the
Yes.
very, very least.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's a loss of events, a loss of community, a loss of regular schedule, loss of income. There are many different levels of loss. And so that begins to bring in a grief cycle, which at the very beginning, Kubler-Ross has a model of the grief cycle, which is very, very good and speaks to this. The very first stages that we begin to go through are a disbelief. And we saw that very much about
Yeah.
4 or 5
Yeah.
years ago.
Yes.
This is in Europe. This cannot possibly come from China, Italy, and Spain all the way over to the United States, and certainly it will only stay in New York City or maybe Seattle, Washington.
Right.
And so we go through a denial, and then we tend to go through a bargaining with the whole pandemic. Well, before the bargaining comes a shock and a denial.
Yeah.
This
It
can't
seems
be
kind of
happening.
surreal. Yeah.
It's surreal. That's a very
Yeah.
good word for it. It
Yeah.
can't be happening. Not on American soil. Not with all of the technology that we have. the doctors who are excellent in what they do,
Mm-hmm.
certainly they will find a cure for this. And there's always antibiotics and respirators. And so this will be short-lived. It's a
Mm-hmm.
disbelief that
Mm-hmm.
this can actually be happening. And
Mm-hmm.
then that very much moves into an anger phase.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell me that I cannot go shopping when I want to go shopping.
Mm-hmm.
And don't tell me that there will not be flour and yeast to make bread, because everyone is making bread. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
making bread, but a lot of people are making
Yeah.
bread right now. And there's a whole other theory that I have behind that. But there's an anger that comes through the normal lifestyle that I've had, and that has been taken from me. Loss
Mm-hmm.
and grief come into that. I know different states have different levels of restriction, and so
Mm-hmm.
some people can only go shopping on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Um, Seniors have been advised to go shopping most often from 7 to 9 a.m. So that there's a restriction on others for our safety. That's wonderful. But
Mm-hmm.
in my perfect world, I could go shopping anytime I want for those lemons. Now I
Mm-hmm.
can't.
Right.
Yeah, so there becomes an anger that's underlying for that, and that follows along with the bargaining. Then I'm going to stay in my place. I'm going to isolate at home and be quarantined, and I
Mm-hmm.
can do this for 4 weeks. I really can do this for 4 weeks. I've got enough toilet paper. I've got flour, baking supplies. But then 4 weeks has come and gone,
Mm-hmm.
and the country is still not open. And so that bargaining that we had has run on empty. And so there is a despair and a depression that comes
Mm-hmm.
from that. We see people
Mm-hmm.
in that level right now. That's what's happening nationally, as people are wondering what has happened. And then there's also a type of a backlash towards the government. We want things opened now. So there are many, many different responses. We can see it laid out on this grief chart, grief schematic, very, very easily. Along with that, though, I'd like to address what we actually physically feel, because that would be understanding grief. But grief comes at us in spiritual, physical, and emotional ways.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So one of the first things I noticed in the first 2 weeks was I could not get down a cup of coffee that was hot. I'd make my coffee in the morning, and an hour later, I'd notice it was still there. So I would reheat it. An hour later, it was still in the microwave. 2 hours later, I may have only gotten a third of the way through. By the end of the day, I still had half of a cup of coffee. There's a level of disorganization, confusion. You start a task, but you can't complete it. So we find that this is happening to so many people all around us.
Mm-hmm.
People can't sleep. They wake up in the middle of the night and they're worried, they're concerned. So there's a lack of sleep and poor sleep cycles that are happening all at the same time. People are weary, weeping, concerned for the future, and crying at the drop of a
Yeah.
hat for whatever reason. They don't know where this is coming from. So we see this happening all around us, and this is a normal part of the grief phase. But these are things that people might not understand as they are reacting and as they are feeling these different things.
Mm-hmm.
All part of a normal grief process.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, we've been in it, like you said, we've been in this for over a month, and I know a lot of people are expressing to me, and I've said it myself, this is getting old. You're
Yes,
kind of
yes.
you're just yearning to get back to the way things were, and having to come to terms with that's going to be a while before that happens.
Mhm.
I guess I've been very much aware as a pastor of the fact that there's people that are struggling with being isolated,
Yes.
isolation, particularly people that are by themselves, maybe older people or people that are, single, whatever, that are by themselves. They're very isolated. But then my nephew up in Long Island a few days ago, we were texting, and he talked about how it's been challenging for their family. They're all together all the time. So that's probably the other end of it. So we're dealing with being isolated, but we're also dealing with people being in close proximity, like all the time, with
Yes.
little breaks. So what would you say, what are some things that maybe people can do to help them deal with one or the other, or both?
Yes.
Yeah. So
That's a really good question, because they're very, very different.
they are.
Let's first deal with the isolation,
Mm-hmm.
because my heart does go out to people that, for instance, are in care facilities and cannot have any visitors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For going on 5 or 6 weeks now, when those were closed down, for the safety of those people.
Mm-hmm.
They have been left very isolated. Singles who live alone might be at home at work, but they are not allowed to be within 6 feet of people. And so I think this is where the church community and church fellowship can really come in, to have a intentional and purposeful directing towards those people, whether that's through a phone call, texting, FaceTime, Zoom meetings. Our
Mm-hmm.
technology is for such a time as this, so that we can connect in with people. It might be second best, but it certainly is still a connection and worthy of using technology at this point. A sweet video that I saw on Facebook was people connecting with those in nursing homes, and they would go to the window outside of the nursing home and sit and phone the person,
Yeah.
and they would talk through the glass with
Mm-hmm.
each other. A new baby had been born, and they brought the baby in the same fashion and showed the baby through the window. People will do what they have to do. Love
Mm-hmm.
wins, connection wins.
Yeah, that's a great insight. That's true.
Yeah. And so we do what we have to do, but we
Mm-hmm.
do have to be aware that the elderly, the disabled, singles,
Mm-hmm.
people that are more isolated by physical distance
Mm-hmm.
or by nature of relationships, need
Yes.
the extra measure that we can do, and especially as churches, we
Right.
can reach out to those people and relate to them, connect with
Mm-hmm.
them,
Mm-hmm.
and make it very, very intentional. So that's the one angle. Now, the other angle of
Yeah.
bliss, one big happy family that might not be quite so happy right now. Yeah, I'm seeing that. I'm seeing that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, my heart goes out to people with babies and toddlers who are up at 6 a.m. and don't want to go to bed until
Mm-hmm.
10 or 11.
Right.
So my first suggestion would be for those people to try to keep as regular a schedule as possible. That would be for
Mm-hmm.
all of us, actually.
Mm-hmm.
We might be tempted to sleep until noon because I don't have to be up for work,
Mm-hmm.
or dressed,
Yeah.
that kind of a thing. But if we can keep a regular schedule, it helps with everything else, especially our sleep cycle, and eating good, healthy foods as much as we are able, not eating all that bread that everybody is making with their flour and baking yeast, or cookies and cakes. Try to do all those things. The other thing is to make time for play. If we're going to be inside, safe at home, not stuck at home, a different mindset, but
Mm-hmm.
safe at home with people,
Mm-hmm.
can we release the expectation that we must always get things done? the
Mhm.
responsibilities that come before us, especially
Mhm.
the children and schooling right now.
Mhm.
Might there be a day that we can just forget about the responsibilities that the child has to get a homework assignment in and
Mhm.
just have a fun day to explore things together, to play board games, to be silly, to build a fort, use blankets over a table and build a fort. I saw today that one of my friends, her daughter's reports are due on Friday.
Mhm.
And so they thought about doing schoolwork, but she said, instead, I'm going to take this day. We're going outside. We're going to go bike riding and just enjoy the weather because it's supposed to rain tomorrow and Friday. So we'll do schoolwork then. And I told her that she gets a big win for this today because this is the kind of a day when we take advantage of all that we can outside
Mhm.
and enjoy one another. It's a new and different time. We've never gone through this before. So to expect to keep everything the same
Mhm.
is expecting disaster, actually, because
Yeah.
we do need to be more flexible.
Mhm.
We need to be more creative
Mhm.
and less rigid.
Mhm.
And so there are a lot of lessons in the midst of that.
I mean, you're kind of saying on the one hand, you should be spontaneous, be able
Mhm.
to make room for spontaneity. The other end, though, is also to still have some discipline as far or schedule, like
Mhm.
maybe trying to get up at the same time, maybe taking a shower, getting dressed, not staying in your lounging pants all the time.
Yes.
Trying to do those things because we need to have some kind of a routine as well. So it's sort
Yes.
of I'm hearing both going on. We need room for
Yes.
both.
hmm
You
It's
know, you
definitely.
yeah, I'm sorry.
Definitely both. Both. While we
Mm,
would want to stay in our lounge pants all day
yeah.
long, um, perhaps that might be a fun thing to do with the family. We'll make
Yeah.
today, on a rainy day, we'll make that our pajama day, and everybody
Yeah.
stay in their
That's a great
pajamas,
idea.
and make it a
Hmm.
fun time. But we're
Yeah.
not going to do that every day because that'll
Hmm.
grow old pretty quickly. And
Hmm.
so, and
Yeah.
especially for, well, children and for us, we need to have regular sleep cycles and sleep
Hmm.
patterns in order to be at our best.
You mentioned children. For parents that maybe have younger children that are watching this,
Mhm.
what are some, children are feeling all those feelings and the fears and uncertainties that we are maybe they're not able to verbalize it the way we do. What are ways that parents can help their children cope with the anxiety that they're no doubt feeling in all of this?
That's a very good question. Children may not be able to express
Mm-hmm.
the fear and anxiety that they have because they don't even have words to explain what a pandemic is. The first
Mm-hmm.
thing that I would say is to limit any television coverage or even radio coverage of this when they are around. I know when this first began, we were watching the news a lot. And after about a week, I recognized in myself that unease, that anxiety, that we just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Big things are happening. And so we limited how much we were watching the
Mm-hmm.
news at that point. If we're watching the news nonstop, our children are going to pick that up. And so limit it for their sake or watch the news after they have gone to bed and get the highlights.
Mm-hmm.
After
Mm-hmm.
that, we want to spend a lot of time with our children and um, recognize the anxiety that they might be feeling. That can most often be seen in regression. Children will suddenly, toddlers will not be potty trained anymore. They'll want to carry their blanket around with them all the time. They'll want to snuggle.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that might seem like they are becoming a baby. Yes, they are, because that was the time when they felt most secure
Mm-hmm.
and most safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so we let them do that. For older children, again, who may not have the words for it, they may be more agitated, they may be more irritable. To be able
Mm,
to sit with them and delve into their hearts and into their minds. What is it that you're feeling? Tell me what you are scared of. There's nothing that you can say to me that will make me worried about this. I want to help you. I want to hear you. In other words, we want to validate what our children are feeling and what they are expressing. Does that make sense?
yes, it does. Very much so.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
Validation is a very, very big thing, because when we validate people, then they feel like they have been heard and
Hmm.
understood, and that's the
Hmm.
foundation of love and trust.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. No, that's great. Great
Mhm.
insight, Cynthia. We're hearing a lot about moving to a new normal.
Mhm.
Governor Wolf the other day talked about May 8th taking that first tiny little baby step of moving towards this new normal. What do you think the new normal, is going to look like, at least for a while? I think some people are just hoping we're going to be able to just go back and pick up where we left off, and it's not going to quite be that way. So, what are you seeing the new normal looking like?
I agree. The new normal will not be going back to the way things have been done. I don't
Hmm.
see how it can be when we've got an international pandemic that has affected
Yeah.
us all. Um, there have been many deaths because of this. There have been people that are still struggling to regain strength. And
Hmm.
so, people that have lost jobs. What does it look like to go back now and have debt? There are so many new things that are happening
Hmm.
that my greatest hope is that we learn from this some of the benefits of being at home as much as we are at
Yeah.
home. For those that are working, um, the benefits of safety and security. And so
Hmm.
as we look at these things, then what can we cut out from our schedules that were keeping us so busy? One of my friends has said, well, she loved her schedule before. She was in a meeting of one type or another every night of the week. She didn't realize how uh, exhausted she felt until after
Yeah.
she couldn't go out anymore.
Hmm.
Um, and so, what can we cut out from our schedule?
Hmm.
Perhaps we can have more Zoom meetings of
Yeah.
church boards, for instance,
Hmm.
so that we don't have to leave our homes. Perhaps people that are flying across the country for meetings now will be able to Zoom in instead and cut out as much travel as there has
Yeah.
been. And again, for the children, um, Scripture says that God will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children.
Hmm.
If this has served for that one reason, that we begin to listen to our children more, validate their fears and their
Hmm.
concerns, then that would be a wonderful lesson from this,
Hmm.
to have family time together, fun time,
Hmm.
silly time. Um, those would be wonderful things. So,
Hmm.
yes, it will be different.
Hmm.
Um, and let's work towards those things that work in a positive way.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I have just taken tremendous comfort in this season of being reminded that the Lord is my shepherd. We're actually
Yes,
in the men's groups in my church. We're currently doing a study on the 23rd Psalm, and
wonderful.
what comfort there is in knowing
Yes.
that we have a wonderful, loving shepherd
Mhm.
who takes us through these seasons that are so difficult. But he's steadfast, he's faithful, and will bring us through. It's so comforting to know we have a wonderful shepherd. Yeah,
Absolutely. And that's where we do find our hope.
yeah,
That's where we find our greatest comfort.
yes.
And so that's another thing that we relay on to our children. and in our families.
Yes.
Our greatest hope is in Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Our strong provider, our
Yeah.
help in seasons past, ages past, and in ages to come. And so we rely on him. We use scripture. The 23rd Psalm is a perfect example of where our hope lies. And so we do that. We speak to one another in psalms and spiritual songs, as Paul wrote, and we encourage one another in the faith. Again, we do that as a church community, but also in our individual lives.
Well, I think this is a wonderful place for us to kind of wrap up this time together. And that's with the Lord, the source of our strength. And we're so thankful for him. And Cynthia, I'm so thankful to you for making this time to talk to me. And I know that the things that you've shared have been very helpful for people. So thank you so much. I also wanted to give a shout out to Kyle Sigafus for setting this up. He's such a blessing in our church.
Thank you, Kyle.
For him. So anyway, but thank you so much, and God bless you all. Okay. Thank you everyone for joining us.